Welcome to this session. We are going to grade today an Alfresco 5.2 that was installed using the default installer in Ubuntu in Linux to Alfresco 7.0 with Docker Compose. So with these instructions, you will be able to move your original data, your original customizations, and so on to Alfresco 7.0, and also to change the technology from a classic deployment to a containerized deployment, to a Docker deployment. So the first things we are going to focus is on the inventory on the default Alfresco 5.2 installation. So we need to focus in three different things. The first one is the storage. Alfresco is storing information in a DB, also on the file system, that is the content of the repository. And we have also some storage for Solar. The Solar is the engine you use for your searches. So in this case, we need to take care of all this data. We are going to see that later in detail. And despite the storage, you also need to focus on your configuration for the different applications that are part of the Alfresco product. That is the Alfresco repository, share web application, and Solar. We have mainly these classes, these files for each of them, but probably there are also some of them, some other resources out there that you should inspect. But mainly, these are the basics for that. And finally, you need to take care of your customization. So you have like source code, you have add-ons, then you need also to move them to the new installation. So let's start with that. We are using an Ubuntu server using the installer. So we have like some sites and so on. We have content inside with documents and some metadata. So we have a repository that is up and running. We have also some add-ons deployed. So we have like all the pieces on the server. But let's inspect that server. So the first thing, this is a default Alfresco installation. In this case, this is the root folder. You can choose some other root folder, but mainly in our sample, we are using that. So the first thing is to look at the storage. So the storage, these folders, content store and content store deleted, are containing all the documents, all the content of the documents you are uploading to Alfresco. So we need this file system, we need these folders in order to migrate to the new version of the product. We have also this other folder that is named PostgreSQL. So this is the database, the content of the database. So inside the database, we are gathering all the metadata associated to the documents. In this case, all this text is in the content store folder, and all the different metadata, this should be in the database, right? So this is the difference. So, but we need both, the content stored and the PostgreSQL. And finally, we have this other folder that is named Solar4, and this Solar4 folder is including all the indexes used by Solar to search. So with that, we have the first point covered. So we have the storage in this folder. All the storage is contained in this elf data folder. And now let's see the configuration of Alfresco. So if we go to this file, if you see this information is in Tomcat share classes Alfresco global properties, this is the configuration for the Alfresco WAR application. And we have like this configuration, right? So this is related to the repository, and we may have also some configuration for this share web application that is in this other file. In our case, in our default configuration, we have nothing. Let me be sure of that, because I missed one key, but I guess that we have no specific configuration. Okay, yeah. So we have some default configuration also for share. And finally, we need to take care of Solar. So Solar have different configuration, one for the shared properties that are applied for both cores. So we have a Solar core for the living documents, and we have another Solar core for the archive documents. So this core has their own configuration, and we have a configuration that is applied to both, right? So in this case, we can go to the Solar 4 folder, and inside we can see the configuration, the share configuration. Uh, in this case, we don't have any because we have this one, so we don't have a share configuration, and we have also some configuration for the workspace store is this one, and we may have also some configuration for the archive core, and it's this one. So we need to take care of this configuration before moving to a new installation. And finally, we need to find all the customizations that we are deploying in the product. You can deploy customizations in some other ways, but mainly the standard approach is to use these folders, this amps folder with all the customizations for the repository, and this amps share folder with all the customizations for the share web application. So in our case, we have at least this and this one, that is the JavaScript console, is a custom add-on, and this that is provided by default by Alfresco because it's provided as an AMP. But let's see how we can identify this later in the new installation. So at this point, we have all the requirements in order to move forward. And let's see how that goes once we install Alfresco 7.0 with Docker Compose. So once we have inspect all the previous installation from Alfresco 5.2, we are going to install Alfresco 7.0, but using a Docker installer. Docker installer is a tool provided by the Alfresco. You have available all the tool in this repository, in the GitHub repository. It has some dependencies on Node and some other tools that are described in this page. So you need to install some things before using that, or you can use the official Docker images from Alfresco, so you can run your own Docker Compose using that. But in order to make that easier, we are going to use this one. So we are going to create a local deployment just to test that everything is working fine. After that, we are going to install Docker and Docker Compose tools in the remote server. We are going to use again an Ubuntu server. And finally, we are going to copy all the generated Docker Compose resources to the remote server. So let's start with that. We are using this tool, this Alfresco Docker installer. This is on my laptop, so all the dependencies that Node and Yeoman are installed on my laptop. And we have also prepared this Ubuntu server with this name, and we are going to use this name, right? So this was the old server. It was named Share Services 5.2, and this is the new one, Share Services 7.0, right? So back to my computer, I'm going to create a Docker Compose deployment for Alfresco 7. So Joe Alfresco Docker installer, and we are going to to select some of the options. So we need the 7.0 version. How many RAM? So we are using like 16 gigabytes. This deployment, this server has 16. Also, the old one has 16. So we are going to reserve all the memory. We are not going to use HTTPS by now, but if you want to use SSL access to your services, then you can like enable this option. The name of the server, we are going to deploy that in this server. So this should be fine for us. And we are going to use like 8080 port, but we can use some other one. But as we were using this port in the original one, we are going to choose the same, so the thing should be easier. We are not going to use FTP in the we can look at this property in the original Alfresco global properties file. If that was enabled, then you can enable in that. If that wasn't enabled, then you can choose like not enable in this one. But anyway, we are going to see like later we can change this configuration also in the new Docker Compose 7.0 Alfresco. We are going to use Postgres, so no requirement for that. This is always yes. There are many features related to this one, so you need to always check yes at this one. Again, you may look at your original Fresco global properties in order to see if you have an SMTP server, an email server or not. The same with the LDAP. If that was in your original Alfresco global properties, then you may use that. And we are going to deploy also the JavaScript console. Why? Because we have this add-on in the original installation. If the add-on is not available in this list, you are still able to copy that on the deployment folders of the Docker Compose. We are going to see later how. And we are not running in Windows, and we don't want to start the script. So with that, we have a local copy of all the files that are related with this Docker Compose deployment, right? So we have the main Docker Compose and also some other files that are required to run Alfresco with Docker. Let's take a look at that. So we have this Docker Compose, and this Docker Compose is including the different services of Alfresco. This is the first one, right? If we can see that this is not the default Alfresco Docker image because we are using a customized one. But anyway, we have Alfresco, we have a memory reservation, we have also some options, and as you can see, all these options are coming from the Alfresco global properties. So if you have some other option, then you can add that original property to this section, and that should be fine. We have also the new transformation service. We have the Serve Web application, the same. We have some options that you may use also at this point. We have PostgreSDB with some options. We have Solar 6 in this case. So as we were using Solar 4 in the original installation, then we need to reindex from scratch. Solar 4 and Solar 6 are not compatible, so we are not going to use the original Solar 4 indexes. We are going to create them from scratch. If I have this ActiveMQ service that is used for asynchronous messages, this is mainly used for the new API of Alfresco. You can take a look at that. And we have the content application that is the new application that is based in Angular, and it can be a replacement for some customers. Instead of using Ser, you can use this other one, and it's deployed also, but you can remove if you don't need that. And finally, you have a proxy in order to provide all the different services by using the same port, the same external port, right? So we have all the different Docker images from Alfresco in a single Docker Compose file. And we are storing also all the data and the logs in your local folder. Additionally, we have some customizations on the images. So this is the customization for the original Alfresco Docker image, right? And we are also able to deploy some modules. So as we choose to deploy the JavaScript console, then in this folder, in this amps folder, you can see at this point, we have these modules, amps, and inside this, we have the amp. So the amp will be deployed inside this Docker container. We have the also some other customizations, but that's fine. So once we start this composition, then it's going to create some local data that we are going to need in order to persist all the information. So with that, we have now all the required elements in order to move to the remote server. So let's move to that remote server and let's install all the tools required for Docker and Docker Compose. We are in the Ubuntu server now, so we are going to install in the new server, we are going to install the Docker and Docker Compose tools that are required in order to support this deployment. So the first thing is to update the repositories just to get all the latest. Probably I will run this fast, okay? And after that, we are going to, I'm following the installation from official page in Docker. So you just need to follow that. I'm just following all these steps. Now I'm installing some dependencies for Docker in Ubuntu. The next step is just to add the repository. So let's add this repository in order to have Docker available to be installed. And finally, we can install Docker and all the dependencies on the server. And after that, we will be able to execute Docker in this Ubuntu server. So after that, we are able to execute Docker. We may need also that Docker Compose. So let's install Docker Compose again with the official instructions from the product. So yes, let's download that, make them runnable, and from that we can use Docker Compose. So with that, our remote server is ready to use Docker and Docker Compose. As we had the all the Docker resources in our local server, then we are going to copy them to the server. So these are like our original resources, right? And we are going to copy all these files to the new server in order to run that. So you can use STP or some other command, or you can even use some program like this one that is just a remote HTTP client. We are copying all the files to the server, and with that we have the deployment ready. So we have like all the files in the new server. We have the Docker Compose and all the configuration ready to be started. Before starting with that, as it's described in the Alfresco Docker installer, we need to make some changes on default folders as for the system, as for Linux, we need some special permissions in order to be aligned with the Docker expectations. So the first thing is to create this data directory, and inside that we are going to create the solar data directory, the solar data folder, and this solar data folder is expecting to have some specific permissions. So let's do that. And let's do that with the root user. Okay, now we are fine. And we also need to change the permissions for the PostgreSQL logs folder. So again, we are going to create the folder for the logs in Postgres, and we are going to apply the permissions to that folder. So it's this one, I apply this one, and now with that, everything should be ready to start. So let's start Alfresco for the first time on the new deployment, and let's see what happens. The first thing we need to do is to download all these Docker images. So it will take a time the first time you are starting Alfresco, but let's wait for this process. And now, as you can see, Alfresco is starting. So we need to read the logs just to see that everything is working as expected. Looks like now the transform service is being deployed. So that's fine by now. What else? Let's see. So we are looking at the log just to be sure that everything is working as expected, that we just set the right permissions. That's fine for now. So it looks like everything's starting. Solar is starting now. Let's see if the chain we did, it's fine for the data folder. It looks like so. Also, service is starting now. So let's see what happens. Alfresco is starting, and at this point, Alfresco is connecting to the database in order to create the initial structure. Okay, we are creating that. As you can see, we're using the PostgreSQL dialect in order to populate all the database. And that it seems a normal starting process right now. We are now starting all the subsystems, that is fine, and creating all the default infrastructure. So we are starting on Alfresco 7.0 by default. So we still don't have the customizations or the original data from Alfresco 5.2. We are only just testing that Alfresco is working in an infrastructure, that we have the right permissions, and that everything is working fine. So at this point, Alfresco has been started, so we should be able to access the tool by using this server. Okay, so let's do that. Let's see if that is effectively working or not. Let's wait for a minute. So everything seems to be working fine. Okay, so we are expecting to have an empty alfresco by now, but 7.0, that's the difference. So we are installing the 7.0 using Docker Compose instead our default Alfresco 5.2 with installer. So everything seems to be working fine. So we did it. So we have Alfresco, we have installer Docker and Docker Compose in the remote server. We copy all the generated Docker Compose resources to the remote server, and now we are proceeding with the next step. Once we have tested that everything is working in our new server, then we need to move all the customizations, all the configurations from the Alfresco 5.2 to the new Docker Compose. So in order to do that, we are going to review the configuration for Alfresco repository for sure, and we are not providing a guide for Solar because probably it's like more complex to configure these Solar Docker images. But if you were using the default configuration for both Share and Solar, then you don't need to do anything. You can use default and it will work as expected. And finally, we are going to see if we have all the customization or the original customization or the original add-ons in our new deployment. So for the first one, we can see in the original, this is the 5.2 the 5.2 server with the Alfresco 5.2, and we can see all the configuration for the repository in that Tomcat share classes Alfresco global properties. So we need to look at that. We need to see if everything from this configuration is being is present in these Java options. So the old configuration was made by using this file. The new configuration for Docker is using all the Java options for the Alfresco Docker container. So you can compare all the things just to see if you have everything covered. If everything is covered, then it's fine. If not, just add your configuration to this place. And the same for a share. If you were using some specific configuration for share, in our case, we were going with default, so we don't need any configuration, then you can still use some Java options in order to customize your configuration for share, in order to get all the customizations and to add them to Docker Compose. And finally, what we need to look is to the add-ons. So in the original, we have this add-on, this specific add-on for the JavaScript console, right? It's this one and this one. Sorry, it's this one for the repository and this one for share. And in the new composition, we still have more or less the same, because for Alfresco, we have exactly the same. We can copy the original from the repository to this folder in Docker Compose. And we have also the one for share in this location, right? So if you have some of your amps in this folder, you can, in this original folder for 5.2, then you can copy them to the new installation. At this point, is recommended to start again Alfresco. So we test that Alfresco work by default. Now we are applying all our customizations we are adding all of our add-ons. So at this point, I recommend you to start a new Docker Compose and to test again that everything is working fine. So after that, you will be able to start with the migrating process. Let's start that and let's see if everything is working as expected. Once we have test that everything is working fine, so Alfresco 7 is working with Docker Compose in our new deployment, and we have also all the customizations running, then we can start the upgrading process. So for the upgrading process, the first thing we need to do is a backup from the original installation. And for that, we are going to backup the database, in our case, PostgreSQL, and we are going also to backup the content stored. As we are moving from Solar 4 to Solar 6, we are not going to use the we are not going to use the indexes. So we are going to miss that. But in case you are moving from Solar 6 to Solar 6, you can also reuse the indexes in some cases. So after that, after we have this backup, then we are moving to Solar 7 and, sorry, to Solar 7. We are moving to Alfresco 7 and we are going to restore the database and the content store in one step. So the first thing is just to go back to our 5.2 installation, and we are going to stop Alfresco because we want only the database to be up in order to proceed with the backup. So no process is modifying the database, no process from Alfresco is modifying the database at the time we are doing this backup. So let's stop Alfresco. This is going to stop Tomcat and it's also going to stop the database, the PostgreSQL. And after that, Tomcat is now stopped. After that, we are going to start only the Postgre database so we can make our backup. So server is stopped. And after that, we are going to start only Postgres. So with that command, we are starting Postgres and no more, no other service. So we are going to create a folder in order to store all the backups. That should be fine. And we are going to use the default pgdump tool for Postgres. If you are using some other database, then you need to understand how a dump or how a backup for that database is being done. So we are going to do that, and we are going to save the backup in the folder we already created. So it's this one, and we are going to name that as db. This is the default Alfresco password, so it should be admin. So now in that folder, we should have our database, right? So this is the dump of the original database. Okay, right, fair enough. And the other thing we need to do is to copy all the data for the content store. So as you remember, this data is in these two folders, this content store and content store delete folders. So you can just make a copy, you can make some rsync, you can make some other instruction. In my case, I guess that I'm going to make an rsync from data content store to that home Ubuntu content store, sorry, in the backup folder. So with that, I'm copying all the information in this folder to this other one. Okay, that's fine. And probably I have one level more than required, but we can fix that. And let's do the same thing with the delete folder. Okay, and with the same name. Okay, so now we have the backup for the database and also for the content store in the content store delete folder. So with that, I can just copy all this information to the new server in order to restore it for the new Alfresco 7. Once we have all the backup for the original installation, the file system, the content store photo repository, and also the database, then we are going to copy all this information to the 7.0 system. So for that, let me create a folder at this point. Let's say that is a backup. And then we are going to copy from the original folders. We are going to copy this information to the backup folder in the other server. So let's copy that. Let's use this STP copy. You can use any other. Let's copy this to. We need to know the name of the news of the 7.0 server is this one. So let's copy this to this folder, and inside this server we create that home Ubuntu backup folder. Okay, so let's copy the content store first. Let's go with that. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we have some duplication at this point, but there's no problem. We are going to fix that later. We are going to copy also the content store delete folder. Okay, and we are going to copy the DB backup to the 7.0 server. So let me find the DB backup. It's this one. Sorry, the DB, as I was saying, is a zip file and it needs some extension. This one. Okay, so now we have everything in the new server, so we can start restoring this backup. Now that we have all the information available, the information from the file system of Alfresco, the information from the database, we are in Alfresco 7 instance. So we are going to be sure that Alfresco is not being executed, that Docker is not running, and we are going to clean all the data folder. So if you remember that, we have a data folder with all the data inside. So we are going to remove all these contents. So in the alf repo, we are going to remove everything from this. We are going also to remove the Postgres data. And we are going to remove the Solar data. Okay, now we have our data folder empty. As we made a Postgres dump, then we are going to restore this Postgres dump. So for that, I'm going to start only the Postgres container. At this point, you can just say start only Postgres service. So with that, Postgres is started, and if you use the -v flag, then this is started in the background. So we are now going to create an iterative session with this Docker container in order to create the initial Alfresco database, so we can restore all the contents from the previous one. So with that, we are inside the Postgres container. We can change to Postgres database. We can drop the existing database, if there is one. And we can create the new database, the empty database with the permissions for the user Alfresco. So, and after that, we can just restore all the information we saved in that backup folder. So we can just say we are on the backup folder, so we can just unzip all the let me write that again, sorry. So we can just unzip the DB to the Docker container that is running. So now all the information is being restored on the Alfresco database. So as you can see, I'm restoring this file to the running of Docker container. So from that, we can again start Docker as we have the database restore with the original content from the DB. And I'm going to do more or less the same thing with the content store. So we have this backup, we have the content store. So this folder, I'm going to copy this folder so I can have all the original. So we can copy this folder to the Alfresco repo data folder. Let's do that. So let's do that to the original um, sorry, data of repo data. Okay, let's copy everything. So if we are going to the original data, we can see we have a content store with contents inside, and we don't have the content store delete because I get that this was empty. But if not, then we can have all the information inside. So with that, we have all ready in order to start Alfresco again and to see if our original contents are available in this new installation. So let's start that. And let's see what happens. So we have this original Alfresco. We can even start this one in order to compare if the results are the same, or probably you have some validations. But let's see how that goes. So once Alfresco has started on the 7.0, then we might be able to see the same results in 5.2, but also on the new installation. So let's try that out. Okay, this is the original Alfresco with some contents inside. And this is the new Alfresco, Alfresco 7, with also, I expect, the same contents. And you can make your validations, but let's start just making a simple validation. For that, okay, it looks like everything is in. I have all the contents inside, I have all the add-ons, I have all the customizations, and this is running with a new infrastructure and with a new product version. So this is pretty good. So remember the steps. We need to make an inventory. We need to install the new Alfresco from scratch without any customizations. Then we need to apply our customizations. And finally, we need to back up the original content, the original resources, and to restore that in the new installation. So with that steps, you are going to be able to move from the installer, from default installer in 5.2 to the 7.0 version. How did you do that? How that was useful? And let's see you in the next video.